Hey everybody, thank you for joining me today. So today's video we're going to play with our gouache, and I'm taking some of the black watercolor paper and I'm just going to ink up this stamp set. It's from Simon Says Stamp, and it had this really bold thank you with it, so I decided that I was just going to stamp both at one time. And I'm going to ink this up twice so that way I have a really good inking on this watercolor paper. What I find is the embossing, it takes on it, but you almost need to do a really good layer of it, if that makes sense, because it's almost like the paper is so thick it barely takes the just normal stamp and heat emboss. But that's why I did the two stampings instead of like just getting one good stamp. I think with the watercolor paper you need to do it twice, maybe even 3 times. So after I cover it with the alabaster white from Brutus Monroe, I'm going to heat up my heat tool and go ahead and give this a melt. And this stamp was really fun to use. I wanted to try some of the other colors within the 60 set that I got, and I did the palette, which you can see over on the left hand side, the pink palette that I created. And I have the video for that. It'll be linked up at the top here. If not up at the top, I'll try and make sure to put it at the very end where you can click over and see how I created the palette. Okay, so these are all my gouaches, and I'm just going to go through my little swatch. I was trying to look. I always tend to gravitate towards the pinks and the purples, so I tend to use those a whole lot. I do like the blues, but my blue pan is off to the side, and I knew I wanted to use colors from this set. So I decided to use the number 6 down there at the bottom. I'm using my Prima water brush print, water brush. Ugh. And I just squeezed some of the water into the little square, the little pan, and I'm gonna get this inked up. Now at first, I'm gonna tell you, when I was putting this down, I was thinking, you know what, it's really hard to not get the gouache paint over top of the embossing. And at first I was like, I don't know how this is gonna look, how it just looks messy. But then as it dries back, it kind of works. And what it does is the main outline of the image stays very vibrant, right? And then any of those like detailed lines, they have a lighter or tint to them from the paint. So it just gives it added like layers in a way. It's hard to explain, but by the time we're done, I'm like, I'm okay with it. But when I first started, I was like, ugh, this is gonna look horrible. But I just keep going because it's a different color. Like I said, it's not one that I'm normally drawn to. And I was just like, you know what? Let me get this down, get me some color on here, finish this up. And if it looks too crazy, I'll just, I'm gonna hit it with splatters anyway, so it's not gonna matter. Now this particular one, I want to say it's the Scarlet Red. And then as it started to kind of dry back on that very first flower that I did, I was like, okay, well, let me just grab a little bit more color and I'll fill in where it looked like it was maybe not as much ink when I was putting down the color. And then I cleaned off my brush with my chamois, and I'm grabbing some of, I want to say this is more of an olive tone green, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill in my leaves. And I thought it was vibrant enough that it stands out against this reddish tone in the flowers that I chose. And then like I said, just go back over it, and yeah, the leaves were super easy and quick. Now for the inside, a lot of times I like to use browns for the inside of my flowers, but on this one, I was like, you know what would happen, or how it would look with a little bit of the yellow instead of like a darker color. And I like how it came out. I like how, the yellow seems to pop, and it makes the flower itself kind of stand out and pop. I really like that. Okay, so once that's done, I'm grabbing my white distress ink or distress spray. I'm going to move this out the way, hit it with the heat tool so that way any wet parts can, you know, dry before I start adding the white splatters, because I didn't want it to get all messy. And now I'm just going around, tapping it around the image. A couple of drops fell on the image. That doesn't bother me. I just think it's a nice way to kind of finish it off. And the white, the distress ink gets sucked into the watercolor paper, so it will dry back and it won't be like crazy vibrant. If I want a really vibrant white, then I would use the gouache white, or I also have the Copic white that you can use for your splatters if you want it to stay very, very vibrant. So with this fun foam, I had talked in my last video about using fun foam on your cards, and especially with watercolor paper. And so I figured I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So once I trim this down, I just want a little bit of a border. I don't want it to be right on the edge. Now, if I don't have any black. If I had black fun foam, I would take it edge to edge. I would just measure it and cut it to fit my card size, because it would be perfect. You know what I mean? It's going to match the color. But since this one is a green, because that's what I had in my little packet of stash of fun foam, I'm going to go with it. So if I cut it in enough to where it'll still be nice and flat, and you won't just see it readily right at the edge of the paper. Put in a little bit of wet glue, and then I'm going to press this down, because I got to make sure that that glue has time to adhere. And then we'll take the backing off and hit that adhesive with some glue, because like I said, that entire piece is adhesive. I just want to make sure that it definitely doesn't peel up off the card front, and we don't have any problems with it. The recipient will have a nice card that will always be in its place. All right. And there is our finished card. And of course, you can put something on the inside. A lot of times with thank you cards, I tend to leave them empty on the inside so I can just write a note, because I want to write more than just my name. And sometimes I want to send a message. So here are the close-ups of the card itself, what our finished product looks like. I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm really enjoying playing with the gouache paints. I want to also try using it on some Bristol watercolor, or not, it's not watercolor. Let me take that back. Bristol paper. A lot of times Bristol is really good for blending with oxide, so eventually I'm going to be using it on that too. So definitely keep an eye out. Thanks you guys again, and I hope you have a great day.